Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss what may be about to become the second clear time that Boris Johnson abuses his position as Prime Minister to hide interference in British politics by Putin's government after a vote in Parliament last week demanded some information that Johnson would rather not come out. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So last Tuesday, while Tory MPs were also voting down the Lords' amendments to various government bills, Labour put forward a motion to demand the publication of security advice concerning Evgeny Lebedev's peerage. Now, I've talked about Lebedev a couple of times, so very brief background. He is the son of a KGB colonel, a man who was actively spying on Britain during the Cold War. Lebedev Jr. is also one of the wealthy Russian oligarchs who derives his wealth directly from the Russian government. In other words, his wealth was attained with the approval of President Putin. So there is at the very least a suspicion that he might be pushing Putin's agenda. In addition, he has never, ever criticised Putin. He does at least call the conflict in Ukraine a war, but that's about as far as he's gone. And he's also cultivated a very close relationship with Boris Johnson over the years. Recently, Johnson elevated Lebedev, the owner of two British propaganda outlets, newspapers, to the House of Lords as well. There is a vetting process, of course. You know, when the news came out again, Dominic Raab said, there's a very strict vetting process. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And the vetting process was reported to be against this. Boris Johnson appeared to ignore the objections, which were largely made on security grounds, national security grounds, and insisted that Lebedev be given the peerage anyway. So can you change your objections, please? Johnson denies that he overruled the security services. So Labour have asked to see the advice that they produced. They want to know why the security services appeared to change their mind if it wasn't Boris Johnson doing the mind changing for them. The Conservatives were all set to order their MPs to vote it down, of course, which would have told you all you need to know about whether we should be smelling a rat here, when it transpired that there was actually quite a few Tory MPs who were prepared to defy the whip and actually vote with Labour on this one. This is the thing, you see. I cannot get over how Tory MPs, knowing that Boris Johnson is massively compromised in terms of Russian interference, especially at a time like this, and how even their party is badly tainted due to the literally tens of millions of pounds in donations that they received from people close to Putin. How can they countenance having Johnson in charge, especially at a time like this? It would be like having someone who was good buddies with someone close to Hitler as Prime Minister during the Second World War. Absolutely unthinkable. Yet here we are. But although the Tory MPs lacked the backbone in sufficient numbers to stop this, it appears that enough of them were not prepared to cover potential Putin agents continuing to ply their alleged trade without counter. They wanted to see the information published just as much as opposition MPs. So the Conservatives allowed MPs effectively a free vote on the issue. They allowed them to abstain. The consequences being that the motion passed without any opposition. The Paymaster General argued for the government that the information should not be released, but the motion was basically unopposed, which means that you won't see the results on the House of Commons website, I think, because I don't think there was actually a vote. The motion was effectively carried without dissent. Now, given that the vote was going to be won by Labour anyway, I think there seemed no point putting a government defeat on the record. It has been suggested that this is a consequence of the Owen Paterson mess. The government forced Tory MPs to vote for something stunningly unpopular, then U-turned under public pressure, leaving those loyal MPs looking both crass and stupid. They warned at the time they were sick of being told to vote for stupid things in future, especially when the government will fold like a cheap deck chair and U-turn the day after. And this appears to be the first time they've actually made good on their new resolve. After all, how do you explain to the public that the information should not be made available to MPs? If Boris Johnson is telling the truth that there were no security concerns that should have prevented Lebedev getting the peerage, what's the harm in seeing it? Because we're not going to see anything interesting, are we? But here's the thing. It is very likely that the information that should now be published will be very damaging. Even the Paymaster General said the motivation for wanting it published was to damage Johnson. Another case of a senior Tory making an argument that is not the defence they think it is. They are basically admitting that the publication will be damaging to Boris Johnson. But if the Prime Minister had behaved properly, how could the publication possibly damage him? So what now? Well, the advice will have to be published, but Johnson still has ways to frustrate the process. For a start, the motion does permit redactions of anything that could present a national security issue. I mean, in a way, it is fair enough. It's intelligence advice after all. Nobody is suggesting that anything that might compromise national security should be made publicly available. But for me, there are two worries here. First, it will delay the publication while people check for any redactions that are needed. Second, it will potentially mean redactions are made that aren't really necessary. I've got a bit of a feeling there's going to be a hell of a lot of redactions. Remember that we're in this position because Boris Johnson wanted the security advice changing. Why shouldn't the same man who changed the intelligence advice also not want more redactions than the intelligence service really feel necessary? I would have thought it would have been a better move to have let the Privy Council see the advice in unredacted form. Because it's one thing if you say publish the advice. It's like, well, then members of the public get to see it. Then there are national security concerns. If instead you say members of the Privy Council, which is senior MPs, both opposition as well as Conservative MPs, will get to see it. You know, they've signed the Official Secrets Act, that's fine. So they won't be able to divulge at all. Just let them see it, then there shouldn't need to be anywhere near, if indeed any redactions at all. If what they saw was damning, then they could tell other MPs who hadn't seen it, do you know what, this is dynamite, we need the public to be able to see this. And they could have presented a second motion to have the relevant sections made public. But we are where we are. The decision has been made, for right or wrong. In fact, in the aftermath of the vote, reports were circulating that Boris Johnson seems to have spent more time enjoying Lebedev's hospitality than previously known. So potentially spending months in his homes without any security present to make sure he was either behaving himself or at the very least wasn't being bugged during candid conversations with people when he thought he was not with others. Absolute madness. The imperative to get this published is clear now. But the potential consequences are pretty bad there. But going back to that publication, and if massive redactions aren't seen as the way forward, so you can imagine Boris Johnson says, right, cross out as much as you can here, right? Maybe leave the page numbers on, but cross everything else out. If, you know, someone comes back to him and says, look, Prime Minister, there's no rationale for redacting these bits and these bits and these bits, and they're going to be politically damaging. You do wonder if Boris Johnson might not just make the executive decision to block the publication completely. In fact, Byline Times have been suggesting that he might. They've been pretty hot on Russian interference from their inception a few years ago. Downing Street apparently said that they may decide that the publication is not in the public interest and block it. So you think to yourself, well, it's not up to the government to decide that. Sometimes it is, but in this case, Parliament has said, no, this is in the public interest, publish it. So can the government just ignore the expressed wishes of Parliament? Well, in theory, no, but in practice, probably. What I mean by that is, if Downing Street blocks the publication, Parliament could vote to find Boris Johnson in contempt of Parliament. They did this during Theresa May's time in office. She tried to suppress the government report into the consequences of a no-deal Brexit. Parliament voted for it to be published. She refused. They found her in contempt of Parliament and forced the publication. We now have this document, with some redactions, known as Operation Yellowhammer. But Theresa May did not have a large majority in Parliament. She didn't have a majority at all, in fact. Boris Johnson is in a much stronger position. Not only does he have a large majority, but the vast majority of Tory MPs clearly feel that either now is not the time to replace him, or that they dare not replace him at all. If they feel they need him in place to win the next election, they are hardly likely to put a contempt of Parliament on his record. So we may find that after presumably some time, they'll string it out as long as they can, hoping that people forget about it. But after some time, Downing Street then eventually goes, look, we've looked at it all. We're not going to publish the advice. Or they publish it, but everything's redacted. It's just blank. It's just like it's blank pages, just black lines everywhere with the page number still on. You know, the ball will then be back in Labour's court. Might be a test of political strategy here. See, they could call for a contempt of Parliament vote to be held anyway. Johnson would almost certainly win. Although it is clear enough Tory MPs were willing to rebel to force the publication, it's not really clear to me that they would make this extra leap against their leader. It could be seen as deeply disloyal and actually potentially not in their long-term interest at just the time that Johnson is trying to solidify his position again. So Labour would have to work with that and make sure that the public are aware that Conservatives are blocking the release of information on UK security risks due to potential Russian agents, just like they did with the Russia report. Won't be easy. The media may not be relied upon to be all that helpful, and Labour do keep refusing to open up their own readily available channels directly to the public. But that is how it would need to proceed then. But that's for when Downing Street has run out of time and has to make a decision. I suppose we'll have to catch up with that when that happens. Until then, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.